Opposed? Motion passed. Okay. Mr. Herbert, financial reports.
Thank you, Mrs. Ward. Our financial report here for the month of June. We had fund balances in our property and state tax supported funds of $9,382,615. We had educational fund expenditures of $1,182,807. We had debt service fund expenditures for the month of $4,856,257. Our operations fund had expenditures of $641,622. We also transferred for the month $220,184.50 from our education fund to our operations fund. That brings the total transfers for the year to 13.19% of the total education fund revenue and 13.53% of the total state tuition support. I'd also like to point out that you see the 13.53, which is very unique for us because I typically do not go over 0.5. But the Form 54 for the state, which is where they report the actual dollars that we receive for our state tuition support, goes down this month. So that was an estimated approximation of what we had to transfer. So I will make up the difference next month to get that back in line to the 13.50%. But just want to point out the 0.03 difference there that I typically don't do that, and we'll get that fixed next month.
So we're going to be looking for a 0.47 next month, is that it?
Yep, that's right. So, but yeah, that's the financial report for the month of June. So I would ask for the board's approval in that report.
Motion to approve financial reports as submitted.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant. Second?
Second.
Mrs. Cherry, questions or comments?
Cash balance looking good.
Yep.
Strong still.
Yep, still good, still strong. We received our tax payments here this month, which we receive into our debt service fund and our operations fund. So we start to see the cash balance rise up there, and we'll start spending it back down to December when we get our next payment from taxes. So, yep, cash balances are still in really good shape.
Thank you, Corey.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion passed. Quarterly reports, Mr. Herbert.
Thank you, Mrs. Ward. For our quarterly report here, we're at the end of the second quarter, so we would expect expenditures to be around 50%. As you can see in our education fund, we're slightly over that at 52.10%. And in our operations fund, we're slightly below at 49.29%. We, throughout the year, obviously have a budget that we're trying to target and maintain, but we do see some fluctuation throughout the year in that. But this is a good guideline just to kind of keep us up to date where we are on a quarterly basis. So we're right in line. Typically, if we're within 3% plus or minus, we're still in really good shape. So obviously something we're going to always continue to keep an eye on to make sure that we're trending in the right direction, which we always currently are. So that is the report there for the quarter. So I would just ask for the board's approval of that.
Motion to approve quarterly report as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Himsel. Second?
Second.
Ms. Cherry, questions?
I have a question for Corey. Just clarity on GEO bonds. I see in the first part of the report, the fund report, the listing of the GEO bond 2019, 20, 21, 22. And then at the bottom of, I think it's the second page, there's one that just says GEO bond. Are those bonds that, again, the GEO bonds have been taken out in the past in those particular years, those are still in the process of being paid off, correct?
So those would not be paid off. Those would be dollars that we received from those bonds that we haven't spent yet.
Okay.
And so that's what those are.
Thus, the term fund report, that's the money that's in the fund yet to be spent.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
It's yes. It's that.
So how do the ones with the year differ from the one that simply says GEO bond?
So the one at the bottom, if you look at your fund numbers, anything down there in that 9,000 series, those are clearing accounts. And so the easiest way, that is one that we have started to incur expenses on for a bond that we're going to issue. Another example of that would be if you look right below that, the construction fund, and you'll see there's a pretty sizable amount of money in that construction fund. Those are expenses that we have been paying out of that we have not received the bond proceeds from to reimburse ourselves back for. So those will all be reimbursed back once we have those bonds. But those are just clearing accounts that we put the expenses into, and to be able to account for them once we do receive the dollars from the
And
bonds.
so what is the GEO bond or bonds that we're currently in the process of paying off? What years?
That we're paying off. So if you look at this report, so the 19 has been paid off several years ago. And so the dollars that you see on there are just dollars that we are spending. The 20 has been paid off, and the 21 has been paid off as well. So the only one that we're paying on right now is the 22. And we made our first payment this month on that one, and we'll make our final payment in December. So our 22 GO will be paid off then as well.
And each of those bonds already are earmarked for certain projects that have had prior approvals, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Last question on quarterly reports at this time for me is, as I go through the rest of the report down into the appropriation pages, there seems, just refresh my memory in terms of how the DLGF does multiple account numbers, but with similar, with in most instances, the same title for multiple account numbers.
Yeah, so the way that it is structured is that, and you'll see a lot of these coming through salaried accounts. And so you will have a number, which they've done this past year in January when they changed everything. They made it to like a 110.00.38.36. So all of those are different classifications within our 110, which is our certified employees. So it's just broken out. Now, the reason why you see some of the appropriations that are off, or some of those appropriations are zero, but you'll see actual expenditures in there, is because we went through the budgeting process October, where the board approved it. We put it before the public. We got all the things done that we needed to do in October. Then in January, they came and they changed our account numbers. So we didn't go back and try to reappropriate or do anything like that.
Thank you for that clarification, the disclosure on that. And I guess your word off reminded me of one other question, and it comes back to the account line for the URSA that is still not yet been received from the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any way to, is there anybody at the federal level that we as board members can send an email to?
It's just
Remind
through the processing of it. I could try to find someone, but again, it's just
Because those are
federal.
monies we have not yet received, correct?
Those are monies that, yes, we will be getting reimbursed on the ESSER level. Yes, those are reimbursable dollars, and we do still have roughly 800,000. Mrs. Walker keeps track of that a lot, but about 800,000 that we have still that has been allocated towards Danville schools that we have not spent yet. That we're making sure we're going to be using proper expenses that can qualify for the ESSER dollars, because obviously, they're restricted. As a fiscal responsibility, we want to make sure that we're not putting anything in there that's reoccurring.
Are those monies were guaranteed no matter what? Just
They
haven't gotten-
were,
I mean, what's the worst case scenario that something goes wrong in Washington and we don't get those monies?
that's why we continually try to make sure that we are getting reimbursed, and we're not waiting to spend all of it and then ask for a one lump sum reimbursement.
Okay.
So, because again, our original total was about 1.2 million. When you look at all of our ESSER dollars over 1, 2, and 3, we actually got closer to about 1.8 million. But just that final ESSER 3 was about 1.2. And so we spend it, and then we go from and seek for the reimbursement of it, so that we don't get ourselves in that situation where we thought we were going to get something paid for and we're left with on the hook for it. So
Thank you, Mr. Herbert.
you're welcome.
Any other questions? All in favor? Anybody opposed? Motion pass. Approval of payroll claims, Mr. Herbert.
Thank you, Mrs. Ward. For the month of June, we had pre-written claims of $4,914,790.10. We had traditional claims of $885,773.29, for total claims for the month of $5,800,563.39. Just to point out that obviously the big expense for this month was our bond payments. That happens in June and in December. Therefore, that is why we have such a higher dollar amount for our claims for this month. But that is nothing to be unexpected. We were fully anticipating that, knowing that that's when our bond payments are due. So nothing out of the ordinary with this. So I would just ask for the board's approval of our June claims.
Motion to approve claims as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant. Second?
Second.
Mr. Brown, thank you. Questions or comments?
The U.S. Bank Are we borrowing that from the federal government? We're not, are we, the bonds? Where's the U.S. Bank at?
No, so that's just who is the fiduciary for our bonds. So they hold the bonds, and that's who we make our payments to. They actually have an office in downtown Indianapolis.
Okay.
That's where our local banker is from. Typically, I think they're headquartered out of New York, but
Really?
yeah, we have our local contact here in downtown Indianapolis that we use.
How many more months will we be paying? I'm guessing a while, but the architectural fees and
I can look for you.
have we been doing that every
We've been
month?
doing that for a while since we started the whole process. So again, it was a fixed fee, so it's not going to be adjustable. I can go back and look and see exactly what number payment we're on. We've got to be creeping towards the end, or we're definitely closer to the end than we are the beginning.
So they're essentially they get most of their money all the way up front.
Yeah, because they've been the ones who've been putting in all the work so far. I mean, they're doing all the drawings and the designs, and they have a lot of this front end work. Meeting with all of our staff, meeting with our principals, administration. So they've incurred a lot of expenses up front, and so it's just been spread out.
Yeah.
So, yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion pass. Payroll claims. Mr. Herbert.
Thank you, Mrs. Ward. We have several payroll claims here for the month of June, and actually picking one up at the end of May and then some here at the beginning of July. So we had a May 15th payroll claim of $451.02. We had a June 9th payroll claim of $708,496.23. A June 23rd payroll claim of $684,881.38. June 26th payroll claim of $1,048.49. A July 6th payroll claim of $134.50, and our final claim for July 7th of $645,786.49. That brings our total payroll claim to $2,040,798.11. And for your information, if you're asking why so many this month, some of that had to do with timing. We had one payroll claim that here at the end of July that just happened to be paid out in time that we could get into this board meeting, so that's why we pushed it into this board meeting. And then you'll see we have a couple of little dollar amounts. Those were with our transition of our payroll software. We have switched from K-Time to Frontline. There were just some issues and some bugs that we kind of had to work through there. So there was going back and kind of correcting some additional things. I feel like we've worked those bugs out, and so anticipate next month getting back to our normal 2, maybe 3 payroll claims for each month. So. But with that, I would just ask for the board's approval of the payroll claims for May through July here.
Motion to approve payroll claims as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Cherry. Second.
Second.
Mr. Himsel, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion passed. All right. New business, approval of personnel recommendations. Dr. Schaefer.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Ward. The personnel report is before you. Just a couple of items I'd like to point out. We are pleased this evening to be hiring Mr. Kyle Owens, who will become the new assistant principal at Danville Community High School. He'll be replacing Mr. Mayer, who left here recently. And also, and with us this evening is Kim Kirashenko and Zena, our new SRO and narcotics officer as well. And we appreciate you being here and your family and welcome you.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
You bet. You bet. We're glad to have you, and Zena too. So, board members, I would ask approval of the personnel report as presented.
Motion to approve personnel report as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Cherry. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant. Questions or comments?
I have a question in general about resignations and retirees. This being the end of the second quarter, how many exit interview forms have been submitted to the district office since January 1st?
I do not know the answer to that question. I can find out for you and send that to the board, but I would need to check with Mrs. Smith.
Dr. Schaefer, I think you can anticipate that's going to be a quarterly question for me.
Okay, I'll look that up and try to have it for you then. And
Thank you.
we will be on the quarterly reports, so we'll be presenting that each month as we do the board goals, so I'll have it there as well.
And I do have one other question. Really glad to see Zenith here and the prospects of helping the corporation. With Zenith being, I understand through your update, we'll be paying the stipend for the care of the dog. Do we get Does our insurance help us with anything as far as care that if Zenith did need an operation or, bites something the wrong way and gets a tooth that needs to be taken care of? I mean, I assume that Zenith, the way I read the update, Zenith has become kind of corporation property.
Would be, yes. A good question. On the medical, the honest answer I have is I'm not sure. I need to check on that. I think as far as liability and things of that nature, yes, that would fall under a property casualty insurance policy. But as far as medical care and things like that, I would need to dig a little deeper to get you an accurate answer there.
Okay. And then similar to how we got Zenith, if there is a separation of service, then ultimately we have to decide later on if there would be a separation with Zenith as well with school property. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Looking forward to Zenith's use. Officer Oliphant, I wish you'd had that a few years back.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion passed. Okay, we are now going to do the oath of office for Kim. There with you.
And Mr. Herbert and Mrs. Ward are going to present the oath of office for Officer Kirichenko. I don't know if Zena officially gets an oath of office, but we'll do at least an honorary one.
All right, so Kim, I'm going to have you repeat after me. Place your hand on the Bible there. There you go. All right. You can face it there.
I'm so used to facing you.